Hello everybody, my name is Jason and thank you for taking the time to check out my video. I've been noticing here recently, whether it be on YouTube or on chat forums and a lot of people, PC enthusiasts and such, have all, constantly talking about budget PC builds, so I figured I would actually weigh in my 2 cents and give my opinion on what I think is actually a decent entry level to kind of a mid-grade or so gaming PC. It's one that's actually often overlooked. I've noticed there's not really a whole lot on this particular model, if you will. Everybody likes to focus on like the Intel PCs from the time, of course, which is understandable. Intel, they were vastly outperformed their AMD counterpart for the time. They focused on the HP Compaq 8200s or the 8300s or the Dell Optiplex 700 or 800 series and the like. This one happens to be the HP Compaq DC5850. The PC itself, obviously, of course, is it's OEM small form factor PC. When I bought the PC itself, it cost me, with the tax, shipping and all, it was about $54. The PC itself was like $30, the $18 for shipping, and then a few dollars for sales tax. Here in Virginia, you get charged sales tax even if it's used. I don't know, reasons, I guess. And from there, basically, once I got the PC, I basically went out and I bought several parts, to try to figure out which one would be the better performing, for price to performance, if you will. And basically what I came up with was, of course, the DC5850 itself, the Opteron 1389, which is a quad-core, 4-core, 4-thread CPU running at 2.9 gigahertz. The best counterpart to that, which would be the AMD Phenom II X4 955, non-Black Edition CPU. Make sure you get a 95 watt if you decide to go that route. But me, for the sake of the budget, of course, I'm going to go with the Opteron, which the Opteron 1389, it cost me, I think, a total of $12 with, once again, with shipping tax and all. Now, you might not have to pay tax in your particular state or country, wherever you be coming from, but like I said, Virginia, for whatever reason, they charge you sales tax even on used things. But anyway, I'm sorry, I digress. But yeah, moving along, 8 gigabytes of DDR2 800 megahertz RAM. Which cost me about $18, and they also have a $30 kit, a 16 gigabyte kit of AMD only high density RAM, which actually does work quite well with this little Opteron processor that's in there. But like I said, for the sake of the budget, we're going to go with the 8 gigabytes because it was just over half the price. The storage options I actually picked for this was a $31 240 gigabyte solid state Kingston drive, which of course is where the operating system and everything runs from, and a few of the online games, because you squeeze an extra frame or two out of it because it doesn't have to communicate with the hard drive. And then of course the 2 terabyte Western Digital Blue hard drive, which was about $20. And then the video card that I picked for this thing, mostly because it was only about $118, was the RX 550 2 gigabyte variant, although I would recommend that you try to find a 4 gigabyte variant if you decide to go with that particular kind of card. Because AMD cards are still, even today, cheaper than their NVIDIA counterparts, of course. But other than that, the only thing I did was the little fan up here front, which wasn't necessary. I just changed it out on my own because, yeah, it just it's a little quieter and it gets a little bit of better airflow. But other than that, yeah, if you just have to go about getting Windows 10 and such for it, which you could still technically use for free. But me personally, I actually went out and paid $16. Of course, I'm not adding that to the price because you don't technically have to do this, or at least as of the making of this video, you don't. But I would recommend you do, so get rid of this stupid watermark that goes down in the corner, and you can change your wallpaper and such. But yeah, it's like $16. You can get yourself a Windows 10 key. But once again, I'm sorry, I digress. But yes, so basically, it's running an Opteron 1389, 8 gigabytes of DDR2 800 megahertz RAM. It's got the RX 552 gigabyte, 240 gigabyte solid state, and a 2 terabyte storage of Western Digital Blue hard drive for about $262. So I actually came out a little bit better. Once again, if your state or country, wherever you may be from, doesn't charge you for the sales tax and such on used parts, then you could probably get yours for every bit of like $8 to $10 cheaper. I think it was, by the time I paid all the sales tax and everything. But the computer itself, I was actually quite impressed with this little thing. It more or less at 1080p below, with the exception of like maybe textures or whatever, so it doesn't look quite as bad. I suppose you could say I would leave textures and such up to on medium, sometimes high. and most everything else would either be on low or off. And for the most part, at 1080p, pretty much all the games and everything that I threw at it played every bit of into the high 40s, into the low 60s. Now, once again, if you don't mind the game looking a little bit more rough, I mean, there's a difference between 720 and 1080p, of course. I mean, it's obviously visible, but you know, if you don't mind that or whatever, then you can, you know, actually get over that coveted 60 FPS mark. And actually would still be able to, once it, you know, probably raise a few more of the graphics options and such, and still be able to keep it to a 60 FPS mark. But for the sake of, you know, 1080p gaming and the like, I actually went with everything that I could, you know, at 1080p. Now, the only downside to, you know, having a computer like this is because where it is, as I said, outdated, approaching antiquated, excuse me, there are several newer titles, and obviously there's going to be more as time goes on and more titles are released, that will not work with this thing, or if there's a workaround or something like that, I've yet to be able to figure it out. Cyberpunk 2077, it will try to launch, you know, the screen goes black, you can see the thing loading down there in the bottom left, I think the bottom left corner or the bottom right corner one, loading for a moment, and then the game, just the screen flashes and it just goes back to desktop and just says, oh, something went wrong. Red Dead Redemption 2, it would actually launch, but as soon as I would actually try to tell it to continue game or new game, either or, even try to play Red Dead Online, the same thing, you know, the game would launch, but as soon as you would try to actually load into the game and start to play, you know, it would go to the loading screen where you got the thing fading in and out and all the colors and everything like that. Then it would always just crash back to desktop, you know, the screen would just, you know, there you were back on desktop. No no error, no warning, no nothing, just it won't load. I don't know if that's something in particular with this, just my system in general, because I have seen videos, you know, people playing both of those games on Phenom 2s, but for whatever reason, I'm assuming instruction sets or what have you, I could not get those two. Those are the only two, but those are the only two that I couldn't get to run. Other games like Grand Theft Auto 5 at 1080p, pretty much everything on low with the exception of textures. It would actually run, depending on what part of the game you're in, you know, like you're in the big city or whatever, it would run usually in the mid to upper 40s until you get near like a lot of NPCs. So I actually had to turn down the pedestrian density as well as the traffic density and such, because it wasn't terribly so, but it was definitely noticeable to the point, or approaching the point of annoyance. But once I turned everything, you know, like the density of the people and everything running around or whatever, it actually, you know, it perked back up. But if you try to run it with too many options at 1080p on this thing, it does cause a lot of stutter. The running at 720p, however, it would actually go over to almost 70, or I think 72 frames is what it benchmarked for. I'm actually going to make it a second part to this video to show all the gameplay and everything just as soon as I figure out how to do the capture. I'm still new to this, so I'm still learning, so bear with me. But the other titles, you know, like older titles like The Witcher 3, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil Resistance, AAA titles like CSGO, what is it called? Rainbow Six Siege, I believe it is. Valiant, whatever that game is. I can never say that, I'm sorry. All those titles and everything, they run very well. I have no issues whatsoever with them. World of Tanks, occasionally you would run into an issue because of the particles, because of the smoke and everything like that. It would cause the frames to drop. It doesn't stutter, but you could definitely see, you know, up there at the top corner or whatever, the FPS will go from being in the 70s at 1080p, then it'll drop all the way down into the 40s, but as soon as you like look through the scope or something like that, it shoots right back up where it's supposed to. So it does have issues, but you know, it's basically, if you want a PC that you could game on, that you could readily build for less than $300, this would be for you. Whether it be, you know, something's happened to your primary rig, you know, God forbid, I hope nobody's going through that. I've been there myself. It's terrible. But you know, if something happens to your PC and you just don't have the money to buy the parts or whatever, you know, for not even $300, you know, you can get one of these and you're back up and going, at least, you know, for the time. Or, you know, for a child's first PC, or if you're a college student or something like that, you know, and just in your downtime you want to play, you know, hammer around with some PC games or whatever, but you don't have one, you know, 260 or so, $270 is, you know, give or take, you know, the prices might go up or down a little bit, you never know. then yeah, this is definitely the kind of PC for you. The only problem with it is what kind of what I was getting into is these things are not future-proof at all at this point. If you do want a future one that's a bit more future-proof, I would recommend going with one of this one's Intel counterparts, which would be like the 8200 or the 8300 or the Dell Optiplex, 700 series, something like that, with like a second or third gen I series. But you're going to be spending probably close to 60, if not close to $100 more for it. So for, like I said, for the sake of budget, to build the cheapest thing I possibly could, but still keep it in the realm of being decent. Yeah, this is what I was able to come up with. But once again, like I said, if you want something that's future-proof, newer games, obviously, they're all going to come out with using the new instruction sets and such, and this thing just doesn't have it. But as a stopgap measure, or like I said, for a child's first PC or something like that, or if you don't care about playing the newest, greatest, best games out there, then this would be the way to go. Or also, I've been tinkering around, using Windows XP on this thing just to see how well it would work on a retro rig with an RH7250 in there, and just 4 gigabytes of DDR2. Man, it works out really well, because there are drivers that support the motherboard all the way back to Windows XP. But yeah. If anybody has any questions or tips, advice, or anything like that, or if there's something in particular you'd like to see me play, by all means, feel free to drop me a message and such down below, and we'll get after it, see what we can do. But alright, everybody, thanks for checking out my video, and like I said, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out. All right, thank you all, and take care.